Hello, friends, and welcome to Mousterpiece Melodies, a podcast that listens to the songs of Disney movies, past and present. I'm Josh Spiegel.
And I'm Scott Renshaw. Thanks for joining us on this comprehensive and encyclopedic compendium of all things Disney music. Now playing from 2023, Wish.
Before we get into our discussion, thank you for listening. No matter how you're checking us out, we hope you like what you're hearing. And if you are, we'd appreciate it if you could rate and review Mousterpiece Melodies on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever app you're using to listen.
That's right. Let everyone you know how much you love the show, and tell your friends to do the same. Of course, you can follow me on Blue Sky at Scott Renshaw, and you can read my film criticism at Salt Lake City Weekly at cityweekly.net.
And you can follow me on Blue Sky at Mousterpiece and email me at mousterpiececinema@gmail.com with any comments, questions, or opinions you'd like to share. And in case anybody wants to know, I realized as I was editing our last episode where we talked about the songs of Aladdin with Aisha Harris that I reverted back into old show language. I realized we did the intro last time, Scott, and I said Mousterpiece Cinema instead of the new podcast name at one point. It's just, I still can't get out of those old habits. They really do die hard. Anyway, now that all the housekeeping is out of the way, let's get into our discussion of the songs of Wish. And to do that, we are thrilled to bring into the podcast a very special guest. He is a freelance writer and an occasional Disney enthusiast, as he said before we started recording. Louis Peitzman, thanks for being here. We're thrilled to have you.
Thanks for having me and for giving me an excuse to revisit Wish, a film that I obviously was dying to see again.
Well, I think that probably applies to all three of us technically. But so Wish is an interesting one. Obviously, Scott and I did not talk about that film on the old show, and I do think, although we are going to technically focus on the songs of this film, songs written by Julia Michaels and Benjamin Rice, I think we are almost inevitably going to talk about this film as a whole. It's only been about a year and a half since it was released. Wish was, of course, the big banner deal for Disney as part of their Disney 100 celebration. The Walt Disney Company turned 100 years old on October 16th, 2023. And although Disney had like 4,000 different ways it was attempting to remind everybody of its century-long existence, Wish was a big piece of that. So I would assume, I know it's true certainly for myself and for Scott, I assume all three of us saw this movie at advanced press screenings or something along those lines, or at least in theaters when it was around. Give me just your sense for all of us. What was your initial reaction to the film as a whole, to the songs, since this was certainly trying to be a throwback to classic Disney, to Disney Renaissance, including the musical aspects? What was your kind of initial reaction to this film?
I saw this in theaters. I did not go to a screening. I paid money and saw this in theaters. I had a really, I would call it a challenging time. I saw this when I was in the midst of doing, for the podcast Screen Drafts, we were doing a Disney ranking of the top 26 Disney titles, from Walt Disney Animation Studios. So I had done a full rewatch, which I've done a couple times. And so I was like excited because I was naturally like Wish had just come out and I was going to cap off this viewing period with this movie. I found it to be a very dispiriting experience. I think that the music itself is quite generic. It's very poppy and it's very, a lot of those songs could be slotted into any movie. And I think in the context of watching every Disney movie, it was a sort of depressing way to close that out, but also a reminder that there are high highs and there are low lows. And this is the latter.
I remember that Letterboxd. On Letterboxd, you were tracking all of those so well, and it was definitely. It was a way to close that rewatch out for sure. Scott, what about you? I know you went to a press screening for this one. What was your experience with Wish initially?
I mean, since it was clear from literally the first thing you see on the screen, which is the opening of the storybook a la Snow White, that, this is how they're, with even the font just being the same. It's like, we are really trying hard to evoke Disney in all of its majesty, and there's all the little jokey references. There's the bit with the, oh, they wish for a perfect nanny to take care of their children, just this kind of stuff. That it ultimately felt, both in just overall conception of the film and in the songs, like someone had fed every previous Disney animated film into AI and said, give me a movie, and this is what would have been the result. Technically it is the same thing that you get from all of the other classic Disney animated films, but only technically, because it just doesn't have any of its own life. It is a bunch of other things that you like from Disney animated films put in a movie together that don't actually add up to something that people would love on its own.
Yeah, I mean, my experience with seeing this at the press screening was that, in places like Salt Lake City and Phoenix, at least, I know in New York it is typically, press only screenings. Sometimes they invite you to like big public screenings. It used to be the case, at least in Phoenix, where it was very lucky if we got to do a press only screening. Wish was a case where it was a press only screening. But they told us you can invite your whole family. So I have 2 kids. At the time, I have a 9-year-old and I have a nearly 4-year-old. I thought, sure, a Disney movie. Why wouldn't I want to bring my kids to see this? My wife happened to be on a trip to Disneyland at that time for her school. So I brought my mom along to, their grandma to join me and to make sure that they would sit still, because in the back of my head, it was, yes, I want them to see this movie, but also I have to write about it, which means I have to watch it. So I'm sitting there in the theater. And as we got down, I was like, wow, this theater is really empty. And it was really confusing that there were only really a handful of people there, even though we only have press only screenings, I should note. There have been times when it turns out that every single person who's ever been on the press list has found their way. And that's usually because the movie is going to be big. Like when we had a screening for Avengers Endgame, the theater was full and it was just press people because it was Avengers Endgame. And I mentioned in our Aladdin discussion, I grew up at a time when a new Disney animated film was essentially a cinematic event. And certainly Disney tried with Wish to make this into a big event film. They were heavily promoting the movie for a while. They included an early glimpse of one of the film's songs, This Wish, in early promotions because, hey, look, it's not just a Disney animated film. This is a classic Disney animated film. This is going to be a musical. We have Ariana DeBose to do the thing. She's going to be in this as the lead of this movie. We have Chris Pine, still the best Chris, I would say. Even after this movie, a bunch of solid performers. And then, like, as I was sitting watching the movie, I was then reminded of another Disney animation experience I had. I forget, Scott, did you and I ever do a revisited episode on Wreck-It Ralph?
I don't recall. It's been long enough that I would say, did we just do the sequel or did we do?
We definitely did the sequel, yes.
Yes, but I don't recall. I mean, we may have just referred to it in passing while covering the sequel, but I don't know.
Okay, and I mentioned it because, as I may have mentioned in our discussion of the sequel, I had managed to be on a focus group test screening for Wreck-It Ralph 6 months before it opened in theaters. It was still very rough animation, and a group of 20 people or so got to give their feedback to everybody involved in the production, including everyone's favorite Hawaiian shirt-clad middle-aged white guy, John Lasseter, pre-cancellation. And I'm sitting there among 20 people, and I'm going to let everybody listening guess. You get 3 guesses, which was the only person among the 20 of us who didn't like the movie. Your first 2 guesses don't count. And and as I was watching that film, I had a reaction similar to what I had when I was watching Wish, which is the problems this movie has would involve having to completely overhaul this film. Wish is a movie where, and I do think it ties into some of the songs because as we'll break them down track by track, one of the big songs in this film follows a sequence where a lot of the side characters raise very reasonable questions about the logic of the film that they are occupying. And I remember in theaters thinking, these are really good questions. Do the people who made this movie have any answers to those questions? Because if all you're doing is pointing out the flaws and the plot holes, yes, great, you know what the problems are, but why didn't you fix those problems or attempt to avoid those problems? And unfortunately, it also does tie into the songs because last time we talked about Aladdin with Aisha Harris, I believe near the end when we talked about the cover of Friend Like Me featuring DJ Khaled, I basically asked the question, why is DJ Khaled? So my knowledge of modern music is clearly limited. I had not heard of Julia Michaels before she was announced as the songwriter for this film. I note it not because she was unknown. She was the exact opposite of unknown. She had gotten a Grammy nomination as Best New Artist in 2018. A couple of her songs have gotten Song of the Year nominations. She's been around for the last decade or so. I believe she also wrote the theme song to the Disney Channel show Austin and Ally, which is a thing that I am now aware exists. Haven't seen that show before. Point being, she was not actually unknown. It's just that I had not heard of her. And as every one of these songs, which I had pretty much effectively memory holed, I had forgotten how much I don't like these songs. I had also forgotten that there's one song in this film that has maybe the single worst lyric in any Disney song ever. And I'm sure you both know what it is. We'll get there.
There's a lot of competition for bad lyrics in these songs. There's a lot of competition, I'd say.
I mean, there is, but only one of them calls out shareholders. We'll get to that one soon enough. But I mean, I remember wanting so much to enjoy this movie and being pretty disappointed across the board, especially with the songs. Like, I know when we do eventually talk about Moana 2 at some point on the history of this podcast, I'm sure then we'll call out the issue of songwriters attempting to ape Lin-Manuel Miranda. And Louis, I know you wrote about the terrible songs of Moana 2 and how much that movie needed Lin-Manuel Miranda. But this movie, I don't know that the songs here are quite falling into that trap. It as you mentioned, Louis, very pop infused. And again, Julia Michaels is a pop singer, so it tracks that that's how these songs would sound and how they would operate. I think generally, though, the one thing I was really surprised by in focusing much more on the songs this time, a lot of the lyrics feel overwritten, too wordy, even to the point where some of the titles of the songs, it's like there's a shorter version of this song title than Knowing What I Know Now, which just sounds clunky when you say it out loud. And, the song in which it exists, we'll get into the details of that song later, but just, I don't know. There is both, it's overwritten and also it feels very airless in a way for each of these songs. And yeah, definitely a bit of a bummer across the board. But
I think
go ahead.
It's interesting that you say how the sort of the plot and the plot holes that are sort of brought up and then brushed aside they play to the songs. I feel like the songs have a lose-lose thing happening where either they're so generic, songs like This Wish, where it's like, I want more things. Like, it's just the most kind of generic I want song you could ever write. Or they get specific and they try to dump a bunch of exposition on you, but the exposition is so flawed because none of this makes any sense. And the internal logic is so broken that, you either have songs that don't mean anything or songs that are trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. So there's not a lot of places to go with that. I do think, though, you can't entirely let Julia Michaels off the hook for this. I think that, the movie's problems are not entirely on her, but I do think that there are elements of this that I feel like are kind of aping Lin-Manuel Miranda, and there are parts of it that are just sort of boring contemporary pop. And I think, not to sound ageist, but Disney has taken to hiring a lot of very young songwriters who haven't done a lot. She's relatively successful, but she's not like a huge name, and part of her whole appeal was that she was young. She did that theme song when she was 17. So, they're finding these sort of up and coming songwriters similar to Barlow and Bear or Bear and Barlow or whatever order their names go in for Moana 2, where it's like they want to get these buzzy kind of before they break through songwriters. And I feel like they might not be at the level where they can kind of deliver the nuance we want from a score.
I think I've made it clear thus far in my as the episodes that we've recorded that I am a musical theater enthusiast, and I have a certain perspective in mind when I think about the Disney films that really are structured like musical theater. And I was going to say I don't inherently have a problem with the idea of trying to do something slightly different, of making a type of song that is not characteristic of it, but this ain't it. It's just, it feels like when you hand someone whose primary job is writing hit singles to write songs for a musical, it just doesn't work. You need a better understand, as you said, you need a better understanding of story. And when you're handed a story that doesn't make sense in the first place, and you have to write to that story, and you don't have experience, or basically the ability, the kind of the cachet that, Menken and Ashman had as basically co-creators of those films to basically say, let's fix this so this makes sense, then you're just stuck with, okay, this is what I can do. And you just don't have the experience to be able to put all of those pieces together.
Well, I think also, this is a Broadway problem as well. If you look at a lot of, recent musical theater scores, there are a lot of pop stars and pop songwriters who are writing for musicals, and they don't entirely know how to write a score. They know how to write individual songs that maybe are catchy or, have a good hook, but it doesn't really cohere. And so I feel like I get the temptation to want to bring that sound to Broadway or to Disney musicals, but I think you need someone else who can help structure it in a way that works.
Well, and the funny thing is the names we're talking about in terms of some of the the more successful songs that are, if not automatically great, they are certainly much more ubiquitous. There's Menken and Ashman, who, as we all know, had a background in Broadway in theater. You have Lin-Manuel Miranda, who obviously has a background in theater. The other names that I think of
Stephen Schwartz.
Stephen Schwartz. I was going to say the Lopez's, Robert Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez. I don't love all the songs in the Frozen movies, but again, you're talking about people who cut their teeth in shows like Avenue Q and the Book of Mormon. And it's odd to me. Obviously, Louis, what you were saying about not just Julia Michaels, but it's Barlow in Bear, I believe. I just checked. And, I'd also forgotten, even though I looked it up when I was about to see Moana 2, I think in my head I was like, did they write the Ratatouille musical? It's like, no, they did the Bridgerton musical. That's what they did. That was their big claim to fame pre-Moana 2. And it's like, it doesn't really quite work. It's fascinating to me that Disney did not go to some of those more reliable names like Lin-Manuel Miranda, like the Lopez's, for something that was clearly meant to be such an important film for Disney, at least as they were hoping to construct it. And I do want to transition. Let's do kind of the track by track piece of it. And to do that, I do want to walk people through the plot very generally so people understand where each of these songs fits into the broader context. As Scott mentioned earlier, we open with the quintessential storybook opening, and we get a very expository narration from Asha, voiced by Ariana DeBose, explaining that King Magnifico, he went to this kingdom of roses. He and his wife, Queen Amaya, they moved to an island in the Mediterranean Sea. Magnifico has studied sorcery, and he is able to grant the greatest wishes of everybody who lives in Roses. Each of them, however, has to give up the memory of their greatest wish to him so that they can be sealed away and protected until the king decides that they are worthy of being granted. Once a month, at a wish ceremony, he chooses one wish to be granted. The main plot begins as Asha is getting ready to interview to be to be the sorcerer's apprentice. Get it? Get it? There's lots of those here. Scott referenced the Mary Poppins one, which, by the way, I saw this movie twice. I saw it at the press screening. I saw it on my award screener. It's only been a year and a half. I don't know how I managed to forget that bit so quickly, but I did. So as she is preparing for this interview, we get to see her and the people of Roses sing the introductory song, Welcome to Roses, where they set up some of the stuff I just described of the wishes and how people have to give their wishes to Magnifico and protect them from I don't know what. because heaven forbid your wish gets destroyed by some, I don't know. This is one of those questions that if you think about the premise of this movie for more than literally 10 seconds, it falls apart. And again, this is a case where, at least from my perspective, Ariana DeBose, my glib reference to her BAFTA hosting aside, she's, I think, very talented. I thought she was excellent in the West Side Story remake, and she's doing her able best here and in the other songs that her character performs. But again, it's like, this is where I don't know how much of the problem is the work that Julia Michaels and Benjamin Rice did, or the work that they were told to do by the rest of the filmmaking team. Meaning, is my issue solely that it's too fast-paced while also covering a lot of critical plot details? Or is my problem, why did you make them write a song that has to have such critical plot details that are kind of difficult to hold on to? That was my reaction to the initial song. What about the two of you? What do you think of Welcome to Rosas?
Well, I mean, I think it's everyone's fault. Everyone deserves some blame here, right? I mean, yes, it's an exposition dump, which is really unfortunate. As I said before, when the exposition itself doesn't make sense and you kind of have to hand wave a lot of these details, putting them all in a song makes it even worse, because now I'm just, I'm hearing it to music, and it's just like underlining how nonsensical this all is. So that's obviously they were set up to fail there, but I think that you sort of mentioned like this is sort of like feels like an AI generated Disney movie in a lot of ways, and part of that I wonder if it is like, getting a lot of studio notes, how it's sort of all decided by committee. So you're trying to please a lot of different people, and it doesn't feel like a song, any of these songs really that were written by someone with a real vision of what they wanted it to sound like. I also think another big problem here is that there's this vaguely Mediterranean sound. It is really vague. Disney, I think has done a better job in the recent, couple decades of infusing more cultural specificity into their movies. Realizing they have to do some research and, talk to people who are from these cultures. But they also now do this sort of compromise where instead of doing, things like Moana as well, they pull from many different cultures and mythologies and, ethnic backgrounds and all of this. I think in an effort to not try to make it all one group story, it's sort of just infused with the flavor of this region. But the problem with that is then it becomes too sort of muddled, where it's like there's a sound in here that I understand is meant to be ethnic in some way, but I couldn't tell you where it's from exactly. And it just leads to this feeling of like, again, you need specificity because it just otherwise it starts to feel, again, super generic.
Yeah, I mean, when the most recent episode we talked about Arabian Nights and this sort of tradition of the place setter song in a lot of now the bell in Beauty and the Beast, and probably the most recent example before this that comes very immediately to mind is the family madrigal from Encanto. That is very clearly to me. I mean, I don't know where timelines intersect. Would this song still have been in progress before Encanto came out? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But it just felt like, hey, write us the family madrigal for this movie. And it just felt like nothing of its own. I'm also going to use this to start a thread which is going to run throughout this. And that is, I understand that approximate rhyme exists, and that it is a tool that can be used in a songwriter's toolbook. The rhymes in this thing are some of the laziest crap ever. It is, I'm thinking about bad lyrics. It's not just that it's like in Journey's Any Way You Want It, she loves to move, she loves to groove, she loves a lot of things. Like, okay, fine, and that's what it feels like. It's just, can you give me a rhyme better than rhyming the word glow with the word powerful? How does that work? I mean, and that's not perhaps even the worst one in this. I mean, this song has some of those. I'm trying to find where some of the other ones were, but there were several in this where it's just surprise and collide. I mean, could you not make an effort? We know that some of the really gifted lyricists that have been on this, can do some really, that's what feels clever. It feels like, oh, I'm listening to something that somebody smart has written that put some effort into it. And this just doesn't feel like there's any effort. And that goes in song after song after song in this thing where I'm going, how was that the rhyme you settled on? Could you not have found literally anything else that worked?
Yeah, the rhymes are terrible in this movie. The rhymes across the board. It's funny. I didn't know where you were going when you said the thread that will continue, and then as soon as you said approximate rhyme, I was like, yes, okay, fair. That's 100% accurate, and that's where I have to assume it's a lot of coaching the performer to say, well, you gotta say the word kind of like this, so it doesn't really sound too terrible of a rhyme, but they can't do it. They can't solve that problem. Powerful. Thank you for that. That was great. Yeah, I mean, again, there's so many questions that I have. Like it's funny. The other Disney movie I was thinking about, speaking of Frozen, was Frozen 2, specifically because I don't know if either or both of you have seen the docuseries that Disney Plus released after Frozen 2 called Into the Unknown. And, it is generally meant to be here's how we made the sequel to one of the most popular Disney films ever made. But in listen, it's not the same as like Trudy Seiler filming The Sweatbox about the Emperor's New Groove, where you find out all the different challenges with that film. That, of course, The Sweatbox is fascinating to watch. It's also never going to be officially released by Disney, so you'd have to do some digging on the dark web or something. But Into the Unknown.
If you Google Watch the Sweatbox, you can find it. A nice copy online. Not that I'd ever advocate for that, but you don't have to dig too deep.
Like I said, the dark web. That's how it works. No, I mean, but here's the thing. Into the Unknown, also, if you have Disney Plus subscription, you can watch that. And if you watch it, it's kind of fascinating how that series gradually reveals that the people who made that movie aren't automatically able to solve all the problems that are present in that film's storytelling. So it fascinates me because I was thinking, what would the making of this have looked like? To your point, Scott, about was this a song that was in development prior to Encanto? Was this a song that, they had heard the Family Madrigal and thought it should sound like that, or something else entirely? Because the end result is just really hard to grasp what they're going for, unfortunately. And again, as I mentioned earlier, so Asha is going for her interview to be the Sorcerer's Apprentice, and in doing so, she gets to see the area where Magnifico holds all of the wishes of the citizens of Rosas, where, talk about feeling like an old person. One of the phrases I know is very popular in modern culture that I just can't stand. They are everything. I wrote that in my notes. Then I said, ugh, I hate that phrase. It's so dumb. Of course, she is amazed and in awe at these wishes, which kind of reminded me a little bit of the visuals in La Luna, that Pixar short where the characters are cleaning up the stars and moon. But anyway, so we see the wishes, and then that leads into Asha and Magnifico having a duet of sorts where they sing At All Costs. The idea being that Magnifico, well, I can tell Louis loved that one.
Yeah. Before we get to that, I just have to ask about the wishes, because there's so many questions that I have, that I think we all have, that I think the writer should have had about all of this. And I think that starts in the first song and it continues throughout the movie, where I still don't understand. There's a huge variance to these wishes, because some of them are dance on beat and some of them are go to outer space, which feels really different to me. And then also it's like, this is a place where your wishes come true, but it's really not, because only certain people get their wishes granted and it takes a really long time. So I just feel like there are some big problems from the jump.
I hate having to feel like I'm actually going to defend this, but conceptually, I understand the emotional premise and the idea behind Magnifico as a character, that it doesn't matter, whatever it is, the thing that your highest hope is, his world had been crushed so much that he thinks that the best thing he can do for someone is to take the thing that he believes you will never actually get, hide it away somewhere so you don't have to feel disappointment and pain of losing something. I get that. I mean, and okay, sure, they range wildly from, I want to write a song to I want to go to outer space. That doesn't bug me. It's like people have pretty simple dreams sometimes. But I don't have a problem with the idea. It's just that it doesn't go anywhere. So that I will defend. I don't actually think the basic baseline concept is misguided. It's just undeveloped. It's just undeveloped. That is my issue with it.
Oh, why can't it be both, though, Scott? It can be misguided and undeveloped. I think I'm a little closer to Louis on this one than you.
Two things can both be true. I'm simply saying that I don't think it is in this case.
Fair enough. I mean, I think, to me, the question that I can't get over is, so he moved to Rosa's first. Were there any people there when he moved there, or did they decide to move there afterwards? And then how does the initial thing of, hey, happy you're here, by the way, I need you to give me a wish. Otherwise, you can't live here. Don't worry, I'll protect it, but you're going to forget what that wish was. Like, that's the piece of it where it's like, no, I need some explanation here. Did he, like, overtake the island? Were there all those people? There, again, so many different questions that this movie has no interest in answering, to be clear. But that's what makes it so frustrating. But speaking of Magnifico, again, we get to hear Chris Pine sing in At All Costs. It's more his song than Asha's. Magnifico sings a little bit more of it. And certainly here was a case even more than Welcome to Roses where the lyrics were just making me mad. It wasn't even automatically the approximate rhyme issue, although that absolutely does crop up here. I'm just not actually going to sing. I'm going to at least read a few of the lyrics here that Magnifico sings at the outset. You pull me in like some kind of wind, mesmerized by the hold I'm in. Leave you here? I don't wanna. I wanna promise as one does. I will, what, why, what? I hate these lyrics so much.
Well, this is what really annoys me about. First of all, I don't think there's anything. I mean, I picked this. I went back to look at the lyrics of this. I picked it apart. There is literally nothing in this song that makes it specific to this movie. Nothing. It could easily be pulled out and you just gave it to some, this, I would not have been shocked if, Julia Michaels had this song just sitting in her book and it's like, yeah, I've been meaning to hand this to, Haley Steinfeld, but instead I'll put it in this movie. There's nothing. It is so utterly generic as a love song. But yes, promise as one does, there's no, it's like, this is the deepest you can get as a romance. It's like, this is just what you do. I'll just promise as one does. Like, I don't actually mean it. I promise as one does that I will protect you. It's like, oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. It's so utterly generic and without any connection to what this is. So, the whole point of this song in context of what's happening is he's supposed to be explaining why it matters to him to keep these dreams, these wishes safe, but he's not talking about them in any way.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like a jukebox musical where they just kind of have, a random pop song and they try to make it fit the plot and it doesn't quite work. But, if it's a good enough song, you go with it or you find a way to enjoy it. But this is also not a good song. So it has no bearing on the plot. It has no real meaning to the plot. And also it's like a forgettable pop song, that, I think Chris Pine does a fine job, but it's like, he's not great. He's not like, the person you want to hear singing really this song. And I just, it's really tough. I think this also, the placement of the song is strange to me. This is where I'd want an I Want song. This is where I feel like, and it also speaks to this problem with this movie and actually other, I think, more recent Disney films is they front load the song so much. And then they have nothing for a long time. I think Frozen does that. It's sort of like a later, to me, pacing problem with some of these movies, but, I don't know what the song is doing here. And it arrives and then it's over. It also feels very brief, even though I don't want it to be longer. I think all the songs, and, Disney songs are often quite short, but these all feel really short to me because they're so lacking in substance that they're just like, they're there and then they're gone.
It's funny, by the way, that you noted something I wrote down too, which is we've gotten through 2 of this film's 7 original songs, and we haven't yet gotten the I Want style number. And I was like, that you talk about placement of it, and it's like, yeah, this should come almost after this wish. But of course, the reason why it doesn't is that after At All Costs, Asha obviously wants to be the Sorcerer's Apprentice, but she also really would like to ensure that her grandfather Sabino gets to have his wish granted at the next wish ceremony. His wish is to write a song that's so good that it inspires people. And in case you have forgotten this movie or are wondering, what song does he end up writing? Gotta go to the end credits for that one. It's a fun little tie-in. I assume you both stuck around for the end credits of this one. At least one of the times you saw it.
At least I had no excuse not to this time.
I opted out. But I read about it, so I feel like I got the chance.
And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, just think to yourself, what's the song that plays as the logo of the Walt Disney Company? That's the answer to the question of what song he writes, and it's really annoying. So Magnifico sees the wish, and he says, "Oh well, but this, this could actually be very bad. I wouldn't want to grant a wish like this because I don't know what your grandfather really wants to do." And as he makes this very pitiful excuse, Asha realizes, hey, it's actually pretty fucked up to have a guy protect all of our greatest desires and decide whether or not they can ever come true, especially since some of those wishes are pretty basic, pretty harmless. And she realizes that he is actually a very bad guy. Now, I do want to note something that I'll reiterate again in a few songs. I had been talking I don't know if I had mentioned it on the old show, Scott, but I certainly wrote about it. I kept waiting for a Disney animated film to have a straight up, unadulterated, out and out villain. And although we do get that initial mention in the prologue of how Magnifico's family had been destroyed or some such, there's no real attempt in this movie to make him a misunderstood character. We don't find out that actually he's not really that bad of a guy after all. No, he's a bad guy. So I give this movie that sliver of credit. We don't have to wonder whether he's a bad guy. And the revelation to the character that Magnifico is the villain basically concludes the first act of the movie. And that leads into Asha singing This Wish, which is meant to be her big I Want song, because what does she want? Something more than this, which I should note. I mean, if you want to go back into the lyrics of something like Belle, you might notice that there's some sense of similarity in terms of Belle wanting more than her provincial life. But even there's more specificity to what her character is experiencing that would make you understand generally what she is yearning for. I don't know that the lyrics of This Wish are perhaps quite so generic as those for At All Costs, the point that Scott was making of you could read these lyrics and listen to this song and it would have nothing to do with the actual plot of this story. But the songs for This Wish are not a whole lot more specific. Again, Ariana DeBose is a very talented performer. She's doing a fine job, but again, some of these lyrics, I'm looking at them again now. If I could show them everything I've seen, open their eyes to all the lies, then would they change their minds like I did? But when I speak, they tell me, sit down. Like, what does that mean? This is all so vague and so also, generic.
Who told her to sit down?
A great question.
I mean, like, it's
her third grade teacher.
It's very weird because we know so little about her. I mean, you talked about, you mentioned Belle, a song I think we can all agree is a little better than this one.
Just a bit.
And it's like, we know so much more about Belle as a character by that point. So even if she's just saying she wants adventure, it's like you already understand who she is, and she's an intellectual, and she probably feels a little bit overly superior to the people in this town. And she, we know who she is, so she can get away with like a more generic, I want more than this provincial life. But here, I don't know anything about Asha except that she wants to work for Magnifico.
But that's the thing. The frustrating thing about this is we have been given a setup for what she could be angsting about at this point. She had a vision of her, this idealized picture of this leader that has just been shattered. That would be a great song. Tell me about what it's like to be disillusioned by the person that you look up to. Really, I'd listen to that song, but they don't have any interest in actually going going hard in that direction. And so you end up getting something that is, I mean, I think it's a pretty tune. I like it as it's a nice tune. And I think that as we talk about some covers, I think it lends itself well to covers because it is, you know, it has some nice vocal acrobatics that are allowed in this thing, but it's just so completely uninteresting. And it's also, you know, we've kind of talked about this in some of the other episodes with things that the context, the animation or the live action context in which it appears can matter a lot in terms of how you feel about it. And there's nothing visually interesting going on while this song is going on. So all you have to focus on is the song itself, and that's a problem.
Yeah, well, I do think that this song, I will say, has a little bit of, it does do a little bit of the Lin-Manuel Miranda thing. I think when when it picks up pace, it does feel a little bit like, again, a much better song, How Far I'll Go, where, you know, that you start to feel a little bit of the urgency of it, even though the lyrics aren't giving you urgency. They're like the sound of it that you finally feel like this is going somewhere. So I do think, even though I think she's emulating Lin-Manuel Miranda a bit, I do think that's an improvement on the songs that come before it. But yeah, lyrically, I was actually wondering if this was written well before the rest of the movie was. I think because this did come out, right, like pretty early on. And I wouldn't be surprised if it changed quite a bit, the film around it, and this song stayed the same, because it does feel, some of these lyrics feel like they're about things that we haven't seen happen or that aren't really part of this movie.
Yeah, so the song, it's interesting you note that. The song was actually premiered at CinemaCon in April of 2023, and again, that's a good 6-7 months in advance. Now, do I think that, you know, they drastically overhauled things? Probably not, but they may well have had to rework parts of the story in between when that song first premiered and when it was released as part of the film. And I mean, even honestly, even some of the lyrics that, again, I'm still looking at, like, the wordiness really stood out to me when she's saying things like, I've got reservations and hesitations on where I should even begin. I'm past dipping my toes in, but I'm not. No, I'm not past diving in. If I could just be pointed in any given direction on where to go and what to do. Yeah, that rolls off the tongue nicely. There's a lot of those songs, a lot of those bits in these songs where it's like, I'm not asking for painfully simplistic language, but some of the, we mentioned Bill earlier, I referred to Beauty and the Beast, the song, last week in our last discussion. There's a lot of great emotion and lyricism there, and it's not because Howard Ashman is going all in on making things wordier than they need to be. So, yeah, I think that's definitely an issue. And speaking of issues, we then get to, so she sings this song, she makes this wish, and the wish becomes a real anthropomorphized living thing called Star, fittingly enough. And this wishing star is able to give the power of speech to animals like Asha's goat Valentino, who is then performed by Alan Tudyk, because anytime Disney is making a movie that is animated, I'm sure Alan Tudyk is like hanging around the studios. Hey, do you need something? You do? Great. And and to be fair, he's fine. I think that he gets to actually be fairly funny in this. He gets to kind of do a deeper voice. That's part of a joke that that the character would not sound maybe a little wimpier or thinner voiced. And it's not just him, Valentino, who has the power of speech. It's all of the animals in the forest who then sing, I'm a Star. And this is the song featuring, again, the worst lyric in this film, the worst lyric in maybe any Disney song ever. I know there are other bad Disney songs, but there are not a lot of other bad Disney songs that have a line like, I want to make sure I get it exactly right. When it comes to the universe, we're all shareholders. Did you guys know that? We're all shareholders in the universe. It's very exciting to learn that.
I can't believe that that's the lyric you pulled out and not, here's a little fun allegory that gets me excitatory, which is like very much, you wish you were Stephen Schwartz.
But here's the other part of that, is that when it comes to the universe, we're all shareholders is rhymed with get that through your system, solar.
Uh-huh.
Again, if you're going to use a stupid lyric, at least, give me some wit in the way that you rhyme it. But, those cosmic boulders. I mean, I did it right now. Right now, I just sitting here. I came up with that off the top of my head, and I didn't get the fucking $1 million that these people got for this song. So it's really infuriating that someone didn't think you could do something better than that.
Yes. I mean, but what else do you both want to say about this song? Because I really think this to me is the nadir of the film, this song.
I sort of agree with you, but I also feel like At All Costs is like more annoying to me because it's just like such a waste of time. And this is at least, I guess, trying for something and failing at it. I do think that all these sort of different like funny voices would pair better with a song that was more distinctive and less pop sounding. I don't really know if this it's trying to mesh that pop sound with the more classic Disney style musical, and I don't really think it works.
And by the way, we talk about voices. Among the voices in I'm a Star, we have Yvette Nicole Brown, who people may know as Shirley from Community, among other roles. And we mentioned him briefly last week in our Aladdin discussion, Scott, James Monroe Iglehart, or Iglehart. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. They both are among the singers in that song. So, again, plenty talented, but yeah, I mean, anything else, Scott, you'd want to add about this song? Aside from looking for those residuals?
No, but it's another one of those things that it feels like, I mean, we've obviously talked plenty about how it feels like somebody's trying really hard to do the Lin-Manuel Miranda thing. This is, to me, the clearest example of I'm trying to write a, rap style Lin Miranda kind of lyric and show how hard that is to do in a way that doesn't come off as absolutely horrible. And this is just so bad. It's so bad.
We're here for all your questions, but go ahead, Louis.
I don't know what the song is ultimately trying to say and how it connects to the plot exactly. I get the basic idea of it, but I don't really know if it, I don't know. I look at it, the lyrics, and I kind of think about how it moves her forward, and I don't really know that I entirely get it.
It feels like it mostly exists to be this film's version of something like Friend Like Me or Be Our Guest or Under the Sea in terms of just big showstopper number, because there aren't really a lot of other songs in this film that attempt to occupy that same kind of space. Whether or not we think it's successful at doing that obviously is different, but like that to me is the only piece of it, because none of these other characters except for Valentino really has anything to do outside of this song. But I want to let our listeners just enjoy a few more of these lyrics before we move on. We're here for all your question marks. If you're trying to figure out just who you are, don't look far. In the sky and your front yard, in your heart and in your scars. If you really want to know just who you are, you're a star. There you go. I love how the next lyric is, did we just blow your mind? And I think, no, you did not just blow my mind, but thanks for checking. So Asha is obviously shocked that Valentino can talk, that this star is moving around. And although the star itself does not speak, it's obviously able to communicate in some way. And even Magnifico can tell that something is amiss, something is going on. He knows that this star has come out of the sky. He does not know exactly what has happened to make the star leave the sky, but he begins to turn to dark magic to continue to be powerful, because nothing he was doing before was particularly dark, apparently. And although Asha is able to show Sabino his wish, she's able to break in and get the wish and give it back to him. Magnifico is, again, he is very much, he has gone full bad guy, essentially, at this point. If we want to say he wasn't entirely before, he is by the time he attempts to get the people of Rosas to do his dirty work for him, to figure out what's going on. That's where the aforementioned, hey, but why are you not able to grant all of our wishes? Why do you decide these things? All these questions that are perfectly reasonable, that they should have been asking the whole time. They're asking these questions. He brushes them aside. He goes into his lair, his big fancy dungeon, and he sings, "This is the thanks I get?" ? Exclamation point. It's not just "this is the thanks I get." You got to add both of those punctuation marks.
Interrobang.
Yes.
They interrobang this mother.
And I will also say the lyrics here also feel a little like Michaels and Rice are trying to do the LMM thing, like even in the beginning where peep the name, I'm magnificent, I put the I in omnipotent, I'm passionate, I'm not petulant, someone praise me for my benevolence, which is all things told, like that's one of the only bits of the rhyming where I think, yeah, okay, fine, like that's okay. I will also say, well, hang on, before you say but, I will also say I had forgotten that the music of the chorus, if not the actual lyrics, I kind of think the music of the chorus is maybe the only genuinely, effectively catchy bit of music among the songs. So I do want to be a little positive about this one. But, Scott.
So I will say two seemingly contradictory things. I'm actually agreeing with you. This is my favorite tune. It's my favorite tune in this thing. It's bouncy. It's got the energy. I think it works as a tune. But that segment you just read is really the perfect example of how easily you could do this better, which is magnificent. I put the I in omnipotent. I'm passionate. I'm not petulant. And then all you would have to do is someone praise me for being benevolent. You don't have to put benevolence there. For the love of God. This is what's infuriating about the lyrics of this thing is they are so consistently lazy. And I'm just sitting here going, I don't understand why this is the case. Why can it not just that little tweak is all it would take to not have one part of one of these songs be horrible lyrically.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I hear you both on this song. I do think that I hold a villain song to a certain standard, especially because we've been so starved for villain songs.
Mm-hmm.
Where, as you said, we just don't have a lot of villains these days. So when we get a real villain with a villain song, I want something that really kills. And I don't think this song, it's not terrible, but it's certainly not enough to really turn me around on the score of this movie.
No.
I think that it's lately I worry that the art of the villain song has been lost, and I did feel that way seeing the new Snow White, where we got Gal Gadot's All Is Fair, where I just would love to see like a really good villain song again, a lyrically complex and catchy song. And I do think that while this one sounds a little bit better than the other songs, lyrically it's not quite there.
Is Mother Knows Best the last great villain song? Yes or no?
Probably.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
I'd have to look, but that sounds right. You could call Let It Go a villain song if you wanted to be like, if you wanted to be sneaky about it.
No.
Yeah,
this is exactly
so.
what we're talking about when we say let's have an actual villain. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason why it's Mother Knows Best is there's just so few options from which to choose in between Tangled and Wish, right? Even if a person liked this as the thanks I get, it's like there really hasn't been any other true villain song since Mother Knows Best. And I mean, for my money, the last great villain song would be Friends on the Other Side from The Princess and the Frog. I like Mother Knows Best, but Friends on the Other Side is God tier, in my opinion. I will say a lyric that is not God tier in this song that I wrote down in my notes. I let you live here for free and I don't even charge you rent. Yes, that is the definition of letting me live here for free. Thank you for explaining. Like, no duh. And I mean, so that's not to be much more than my benevolence versus benevolent, but a very good point. So after he sings this song, Magnifico he is opened up this book. He is allowing its dark magic to course through his veins. He's a real nasty guy now. And at the same time, Asha is trying to convince her friends who are, it's funny, on Wikipedia at least, they are nicknamed the Teens, which reminded me of how, speaking of Broadway and Disney, kind of, sort of, when they did Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, Spider-Man, would you please turn off the dark? They did, like, the earliest version had a geek chorus, not Greek chorus, geek chorus. And that reminded me of that. But no, so the Teens, there's these 7 friends Asha has, you see. Each of these friends has a distinctive trait. One of them is grouchy. One of them is super upbeat. One of them is tired all the time. And I think by now you get the point. So she tries to get these 7 friends of hers, who are not all very tiny, I should note, but they are 7 friends, and she tries to get them all to work with her to take down Magnifico, to free the wishes. But unfortunately, who among us would not have expected that of the 7 dwarves, the natural Judas figure would be Sleepy? Apparently. Sleepy, aka Simon, voiced by Evan Peters. It turns out he has told Magnifico what Asha is up to so that he can have his wish come true. His wish is to be the fiercest defender of Magnifico, to be this powerful soldier. All the other friends and Asha, as well as King Magnifico's wife, Amaya, voiced by Angelique Cabral, they all work together to, they decide they're going to take him down, and in doing so, they sing the song aforementioned by me, knowing what I know now. And this is another one where I think the music of it is okay. It moves quickly enough. The lyrics, I think, are pretty much very similar to the issues we've had with the other songs so far. Both too lazy and also too wordy, and trying to do too much all at the same time. What do the two of you think of this one?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with exposition again, and it sort of just recounts the plot we've just seen, which is, so we're not off to a great start there. I think you're right that the sound of it is basically fine. It is again, like, it has a bit more of a propulsive energy, which we obviously need at this point in the movie. We haven't heard the song in a while, for one thing. And we're kind of getting to the climax. I do feel like, obviously a lot of Disney songs, a lot of musical theater songs are repetitive by nature, but these songs feel so much more repetitive than your standard Disney song. I just like the number of times they say, knowing what we know now, is it's excessive. And by the end, I'm like ready for them to, be done knowing things. It just keeps going. Another song that feels very short, but that somehow is endless. So yeah, I wouldn't say that I love this one either. But I appreciate the energy and the drumming, which kind of, makes it feel a little bit more like there's something going on there. It's not just this like airless, like this pop song that's disappearing right away. There's something to it. At least there's a percussive element.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because obviously we've been making a lot of comparisons to other Disney songs and their kind of antecedents and comparables. This to me felt like the attempt to write Can You Hear the People Sing from Les Miserables. It's the Revolution song. So it's going to have that martial beat to it. It's going to have that da-da-dum, da-da-dum. And it's like, okay, I get what you're trying to do. It's just not interesting enough on its own. And although, as we will eventually get to with the This Wish reprise, I actually am like, oh, the whole idea here is taking on a little bit more resonance at this moment. But the song itself is just like, it's someone going, you need this kind of song here. And I think that there are people who have enough experience to be able to take this kind of song note and to write their own version of that. That's actually a good and interesting version rather than I'll write second tier Les Miserables.
Yes, and I will say again, the lyrics here are not helping out too much. I'm looking again because there were a couple that stood out to me. Just, can he tell what we're becoming? Hear it in the way we're drumming. Okay, I will if you say so. And then he thinks we're nothing, but we're something else. Okay.
Which is like, again, I mean, they also use that same phrasing in the, right before that with the I was sweet, but now I'm something else. Mm-hmm. Where it does feel like such lazy songwriting. Mm-hmm. Really, really lazy stuff.
Yes. And the last one I'll note, when Asha says, now I've seen him show his true colors in shades of green. Well, just one color then technically, but okay. And so that ties to the climax of the film. Again, they want to work together to free all of the wishes of the Kingdom of Rosas. Obviously, Magnifico does not want that to happen. And so there's a big fight. Magnifico has attempted to essentially hold all of the people in Rosas, to essentially control them through his dark magic. He has attempted to block the sky, immobilizing everybody. And Asha is basically able to convince everybody, partially through the power of song, through the reprise of This Wish, as Scott just mentioned, to stand up against Magnifico, to push back against him, to overpower him from his dark magic. And I mean, the interesting part of it is, even with the earlier scene where some of the random members of Rosas are beginning to question Magnifico and his whole thing and everything about their lives on Rosas, it doesn't automatically feel like everybody aside from Asha and 6 of her 7 friends are willing to commit to that revolution until he starts actually immobilizing all of them, leading to this song. I mean, it's okay. Partially it's interesting. It's always interesting when we talk about these different movies, which songs get the reprise and at what point. And I think, to me, my reaction was it felt sappy and unearned. I think it feels a little odd that the song is part of this big climax as opposed to coming after the climax as part of the falling action. So, I mean, what about the two of you? What do you think about this reprise?
I'm going to challenge that, because I think that this version is much better than the first in a storytelling context, because we have this very generic sounding, I just want something initially. And here, the idea of still having a wish or being able to hope for something at the moment of despair feels resonant. It actually, there's something about that actually kind of clicks. It's like, I'm going to still, and this is where I'm going to again go back to the idea that Magnifico is trying to protect people from having hopes that they know can be dashed. And it's like, having hopes when you still think they can be dashed is pretty freaking powerful. And that is something that I think is actually evoked in this reprise that isn't present in the same way in the original. So I was sitting there going, all right, I kind of get this song now. I get it in this context in a way that it doesn't quite work emotionally initially.
I do think this moment works. It is sort of stirring when all the voices join together. That's always something that I like hearing. I do think that, this all kind of goes with the idea of how generic it all is, and sort of this song being about, wishing more. And part of that is like a plot reason, which is that none of these people know what their wishes are. So they're fighting for getting their wishes back, but they don't actually know what they want. And that is a plot thing. I haven't worked it all out. I'm sure there are plot reasons why they can't remember what their wishes are, and why, if they did, it would sort of break this movie. But it also kind of breaks it the other way, because they can only be so motivated when they don't know what their fight is. They're all joining with her, but it's like they don't really know what they're striving for beyond the ability to wish and have your wish come true. So I wonder if there was another way to get to that point. I like how it all sounds, but I do feel like there's just a fundamental problem where they're forced to be generic because they can't be more specific about what their wishes are. They simply do not know.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it also, by the way, one thing that I don't think I mentioned yet, but just it was really hard when I watched this originally, and now we've talked a little bit about how certain songs feel like they were designed as make a song like this, make a song like that. I feel like this entire movie was reverse engineered. I don't know it for a fact, of course, but it feels like Bob Iger came to Disney, to Chris Buck, who co-directed this film, to Jennifer Lee, who also worked on this film and the script, and said, I need a movie for the 100th anniversary of Disney. It's got to be special. It's got to relate to other Disney films in one way or another. Go do that. And then they came up with this afterwards. Again, I don't know if that's what it is, but that's really what it feels like. And sometimes reverse engineering can work, and sometimes it, as in this case, it does not. And I do want to note, I did say earlier, there are 7 original songs here, and we haven't gotten to the 7th one. That's the one that plays over the end credits, because of course, after the Kingdom of Roses comes together, they push back. Magnifico is trapped for good in a tiny little sliver of a mirror that goes into the dungeon, which smells really bad, according to him. And we then get the little falling action where Asha is now going to be everybody's fairy godmother, because why not? And by the way, talking about people's wishes, are we meant to think then that literally one of the people in Rosas is a kid named Peter who really wishes he was a flying kid who lived in Neverland. Talking about random references here. There's that one bit with Magnifico destroying his wish. Yeah, very dumb. Yes. So we get to the end credits. Everything lives happily ever after, except for the audience who watched the movie. And we get this last song, A Wish Worth Making, that Julia Michaels herself performs. And listen, I don't have anything different to say about this one. I didn't pay attention to the lyrics. It's as generic as it gets. What I will say is this, and it's not so much about the song as about what occurs while the song is playing. And that's, you have your end credits, all the different people involved in making this film. It also has starry constellation images of famous Disney characters. And the thing that I remembered when I brought my kids to see this, I should note, they were, I think, about 45 minutes in, it was very clear to me, like, oh, none of us are enjoying this movie. Good to know. They were both very antsy, to the point where as soon as the end credits started, they wanted to leave. So I didn't actually notice those constellation images until I watched the screener. And I was struck by the fact that there are a lot of gaps in those constellations, by which I mean it's like Snow White, Bambi, Dumbo, Pinocchio, the Sorcerer's Apprentice from Fantasia. And let's skip ahead to Ichabod and Mr. Toad. And it's like, no Three Caballeros? Come on. We all know Jose Carioca and Panchito Pistoles and Donald Duck, one of the most famous Disney characters of all time. There's a lot of different gaps that I thought, you're honoring 100 years of Disney. You're honoring all the 62 animated films. You don't want to include all of them? There's no rescuers. Yes.
But don't worry, Chicken Little is there.
Oh God.
There were two Rescuers movies and they couldn't spare one of them.
It's head scratching. I mean, for either of you, did that last song stand out negatively or potentially positively for any reason?
No. I mean, I forgot that, because when I saw it in theaters, I was paying attention to, who was showing up in the end credits, because I noticed the gaps immediately, and then I was like, what are they doing here? I didn't even think about it being an original song until I watched it this time, and then looked at the lyrics and all of that. I think it's pretty not great. The whole part where they anthropomorphize hope and time. So if hope schemes against time, tell them be nice, play fair. Yeah, they may kick and cry. Yeah, but just show them they're better when paired. It's really sweaty. It's really, it's tough. And then I think that I guess the message of the song is pleasant enough. I think that you're right about this movie being reverse engineered. They obviously wanted something that was about, wishing upon a star, or, a dream being a wish that your heart makes. It's all this stuff, it's just sort of similar iterations of the same concept over and over again to get to the idea of wishing broadly. And I don't think that's a good way to make a movie. I think that there's a fundamental flaw in how this movie was conceived, which was let's build it around Easter eggs, and hit our classic Disney theme. I don't think that really works.
No. I don't have anything. I mean, I actually didn't know until I was looking at it. It's so who does the vocals of this? Okay, it's Julia Michaels doing the vocals for it, and I guess that's why I haven't really paid attention to her, because there's nothing interesting about her voice. This is going to be the Julia Michaels bash session. You can't write the song and you can't sing it, so why are you here?
That's a mic drop, it sounds like. And I should note, so obviously, it's not just that we clearly were not fans of the songs of this film or the film itself. This was a pretty big financial disaster for Disney. It made $64 million in the States. Overall, just over $250 million, which obviously to any one person is a ton of money. But if Deadline Hollywood, which never is wrong, never has an industry slant, said that they calculated the movie lost Disney about $130 million. Critics, not big fans of it. It didn't even get an Academy Award nomination. It did get a Golden Globe nomination for Best Animated Feature, which is as useless as that sounds. So yeah, I mean, it was a big swing and a miss overall. And that's one of the things that so disappointed me about the success of Moana 2 at the box office was it's easy, and I would argue inaccurate, to look at the success of Moana 2 versus the very clear lack of success for Wish and be like, well, people want sequels. And it's like, no, people are fine with good original films. They gotta be good. You gotta have catchy songs. You gotta have an interesting story and a compelling character. And this movie has none of those things. Now, I will admit, I was so displeased by these songs. I don't even know. Are there covers out there, Scott? You've been doing such good research in our previous episodes. Any Norwegian death metal?
No Norwegian death metal versions of these songs. I mean, I think that obviously what's slightly different is because we're talking about a movie that's so recent is
Right.
that they haven't been recorded versions. I mean, look, we're living in the era where anyone just puts up a YouTube video of them doing a version of songs. So you're going to find many, many versions of people singing This Wish and various other songs just to, potentially try to get them a record contract of their own. I mean, I don't know all the reasons for it. But again, I think what's instructive about listening to other versions outside of the context of the movie is just to know, is the problem the song? I mean, in this case, obviously we were talking about songs that are problems, or, in some of the cases we've talked about earlier, do they work only because they work in the context of the movie versus outside of it? And I think these songs are so, This Wish is such a generic song that you listen to any given person singing This Wish and it's like, yeah, that's just as good. It's it's got a pretty tune, and anyone with a really solid vocal range is going to make it sound good. It's just not a good song for a storytelling enterprise. And so I think this is where, to me, it's like, it's interesting to see that, any dozen people that record this song on YouTube, it's like, okay, you're not Ariana DeBose. I'm not suggesting that, but you've done justice to this song in just as much of a way as she has. Whereas, for example, there were a couple people who did versions of This Is the Thanks I Get, trying to do it in sort of a more hyper pop. No. There's a YouTuber named Caleb Hiles who does a lot of Disney versions and tried to do a version of that. It's like, this is actually the song that I kind of liked listening to it in the movie, and this is the thanks I get.
Yeah, I mean, the recency point is obviously very well made. Obviously, we're talking about something that it's, again, less than 2 years ago. Big covers, there are not going to be a lot of those, unsurprisingly.
I don't know that this is a movie that's going to grow in
No.
esteem and cultural footprint over time. So I think that recency might be the only thing in its favor in terms of us, anyone talking about it. I just don't, I don't see this growing at all. And I do think that, like, it's interesting. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people. I mentioned to some friends that I was rewatching this movie, and like many of them who are essentially people who watch Disney films had like not seen it because they heard it was bad. It just didn't. There was no urgency to see it, and they never did. And I just feel like it's not forgotten, but it may one day be forgotten. It's certainly not going to be one of the Disney films people return to. It sounds like even kids don't like it. So I can't imagine it's a movie that people, the parents are going to have forced on them over and over again.
Here's the if there's a silver lining, in 20 to 25 years, we will not get a live action version of Wish.
Well, that hopefully is true. Yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
from your lips to God's ears. I think that there is a chance when they run out of titles, we'll eventually have to do that, but not for a long time. I also, at one point, I'm almost positive, but now I can't find documentation. They had planned on making Asha a Disney princess. Before the movie came out, there was something about how she was going to be the next Disney princess. And now that seems to be scrubbed from the internet, or I'm crazy. But I could have sworn it was a thing that was going to happen. So it's funny that she is no longer mentioned anywhere in Disney princess literature. She's not there at all.
Yeah, that does not surprise me too much.
She's been Meghan Markled. She's been.
The last Disney princess now is Raya.
Yes.
Another character who doesn't make much sense to me as a Disney princess, but that is not my business. That's whatever they want to do. That's their choice.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's funny because we've obviously both this relatively new show and on the old show, we talked about how some Disney films, older Disney films, kind of get a second life. We mentioned things like these like the remakes now, but there used to be a time when Disney would just re-release older films and essentially make them become popular to a younger audience. A fact I always enjoy pointing out is that movies like Fantasia and Sleeping Beauty were not successful when they were initially released. It was only because Disney essentially kept releasing them, obviously before the era of home media. So I feel like if this movie had come out at a different, much earlier time, obviously it would be different for a number of reasons, but Disney could have almost self-mythologized it into becoming successful, whereas now, I mean, it's funny looking now at how the industry trades recovering the box office performance of this film. You can see something of like, well, maybe it will do what Elemental did, because that movie came out in the summer of 23 and did not start strong, but ended up doing relatively well over that summer. And certainly movies released around the holiday season can have a longer shelf life, but certainly that was not the case with Wish. So yeah, I think unless either of you have anything else you'd want to add on this one, I think the Julia Michaels batch session is going to end. I'm guessing none of us are going to get a Christmas card for her this coming season. Yeah, you're fine with that. I know, Scott. Wives, take us out.
All right. So with that, it's time to turn down the volume on Mousterpiece Melodies. What's on the playlist for our next episode? Happy 30th birthday, 1995's Toy Story. While you wait, make sure you subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcasts. Louis Peitzman, thank you so much for joining us today. I know we mentioned some of your credits at the top of the show, but can you let our listeners know where they can find you on the internet or elsewhere?
Yes, you can find me at Louis Peitzman on Blue Sky, Instagram, Letterboxd. Those are the ones that I use at this point. I am also in the process of starting a new podcast, which I will announce now in a quiet way, even though it's not. We have not put out the official announcement yet, but my friend Dane McDonald and I are doing a Chasing Amy Adams podcast, where we go through her filmography. So that will be coming out, I think, sometime this summer, hopefully in June.
We've had breaking news on this. I'm
That's
so
awesome.
thrilled.
Yeah. Well, it's awesome anyway, because of course, whenever you do talk about, speaking of Disney princesses, Enchanted, I mean, I think I have long said, cold take, she should have won an Oscar for that film. So I'm looking forward to that show as a whole. She's an excellent actress who probably should have a couple Oscars by now.
That is true. Yes. Thank you.
Of course. And I was also going to say, so I know one of the various things you cover. So I mentioned last week that my wife got me into Grey's Anatomy. There's another show that my wife, literally in the last month, started watching that you recap at Vulture, and that would be 911, which I have, against my better judgment from not liking other Ryan Murphy shows, I have gotten into that show. And I should note, this episode's going up on May 5th. We're recording this in the middle of April, and I know I've yet to watch the most recent episode, but I didn't spoil myself in a very big twist, a very big event that you covered in your most recent recap. I've enjoyed reading those as much as I've enjoyed watching that very odd show. But yes, so anyway, we would love for all of you out there to listen along. Tell us what you think. Did you see Wish when it came out or when it was streaming on Disney Plus? Do you think we're crazy? Do you love the songs of Wish? Are you Julia Michaels and or a relative of Julia Michaels who is very angry at us by this point in the show? Maybe in that case, I don't want you to email me at masterpiececinema@gmail.com, but you always can if you want to. You can follow me on Blue Sky at Mousterpiece. And as I noted, so it's May 5th when this episode goes out. I am in the middle of the fun, exciting time of recapping Andor for Episodic Medium without screeners. I haven't seen them yet because of when we're recording this, but I'm sure I'll be knee-deep in them as you listen. I will also, later this week, begin recapping the second season of Poker Face at Episodic Medium. I am very excited to get back into the world of Charlie Cale. I loved the first season of Poker Face. Very excited for season 2. Obviously, anything else I'm writing, you can find me linking on Blue Sky at Mousterpiece. Scott, where can our listeners find you online?
You can find me on Blue Sky at Scott Renshaw. I also have writings on various things, including my recent capsules on Letterboxd at Scott Renshaw. Just recently put up some spoilery thoughts on Ryan Coogler's Sinners. And as this goes up, I will probably have some thoughts about another Disney company release that will be coming out the first weekend in May. You can find it. There's an asterisk somewhere along the line. And you can also find my general film criticism at Salt Lake City Weekly. That's cityweekly.net. I'm Scott Renshaw.
And I'm Josh Spiegel, and we'll see you all next time on Mousterpiece Melodies.